This video is brought to you by Squarespace.
In 2002, during the Battle of Taku Gar in Afghanistan, US Special Forces, led by SEAL Team 6, fought a bloody two-day battle against the Taliban, losing 2 Chinooks in the process. After the battle, the question of how to recover these lost Chinooks frustrated the army. You see, an MH-47 was a 12-ton beast without a rotor and crew, and they were stranded at an altitude of 2,600 and 3,100 meters above sea level, respectively. A Super Stallion, the heavy lifter that the US had at its disposal, could lift around 9 tons at that altitude, so the planners turned to a controversial and unconventional solution. The Super Stallion might have been America's heaviest lifter, but it wasn't the strongest helicopter in the world. So the US Army found itself contracting a civilian company that operated a Mi-26 from Russia to rescue Chinooks in a daring operation, which they did, not breaking even a sweat, because a Chinook was just over half the maximum payload of this massive beast. This has left many American experts scratching their heads exactly how the Soviets came up with the world's largest helicopter, and what is the key secret behind the insane engineering of the Mi-26 Halo. The roots of the Mi-26 development go far, and I mean really far back into Cold War history. Back in the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was handling the conundrum of how to get heavy machinery and military hardware over the vast distances and unpopulated Siberia. The solution was building a super heavy lifter. The Kharmov Bureau proposed a very innovative solution with the Kar-22, but as we've said in our video on the topic, which you can watch right now on the channel, MIL prevailed with their much more conservative approach, and the Mi-6 became the famous Soviet heavy lifter. But as time went on, missiles were getting bigger, equipment heavier, and requirements for a new helicopter more and more insane. In the late 1960s, MIL went above and beyond with a new experimental heavy lifter, claiming many world records, and shocked the world in 1971 by presenting the MIL V12 at the Paris Air Show, a 100-ton beast carrying 40 tons of cargo powered by 4 engines, that's something the world had never seen before. But this aircraft never entered service because one of the key requirements, rapid deployment of the strategic nuclear forces of the Soviet Union, just became obsolete, and the Soviet leadership was just, well, we don't need this anymore. But there is a caveat to this story. There was no need for a helicopter that big, but there was certainly a need for a helicopter that was bigger and more powerful than the aging Mi-6 for the future of the armed forces. And that's exactly where the history behind the Mi-26 begins.
When it comes to completing your mission, sometimes it's important to choose the very best tool for the job, just like the Russians did with the Mi-26 to conquer Siberia. But when it comes to online business, there's no better tool than Squarespace and their new design intelligence. That's right, the amazing Squarespace website creator has combined 2 decades of industry-leading design expertise with their own cutting-edge AI to give you your best website yet. Squarespace will actually recommend a fantastic design to reach your goals. They'll give you a unique digital identity online, and you'll never look like a template again. But building this website with Squarespace is only the beginning, because with it you can also do email campaigns, you can get more customers for your business, and you can even now launch courses with their educational portal. Amazingly, I actually use Squarespace for my own Found and Explained shop, so you know that I can vouch for it. So head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to www.squarespace.com/found to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
It starts again with another competition with Kharmov and MIL taking place for this new lucrative contract. Kharmov would persist with its application of its innovative gyrodyne concept with the Kar-35, combining 2 gas turbines and 2 jet engines, while MIL would go again for a super conservative solution called the Mi-6M, where the M simply stood for modernization. Soon enough, they realized that they needed a completely new program to beat Kharmov and started working on a new helicopter called the Mi-26. There were 3 proposed variants: a twin rotor variant similar to the Mi-V12, a copy of the Chinook with twin tandem rotors, and a single massive rotor variant, which would be the safest and least complicated one to build, if, and a big if, they could figure out how to make it work. So naturally, their official proposal for the new program was this, and again, naturally, they won. Sorry Kharmov, better luck next time. But it wouldn't be easy sailing for Mil, because building a new helicopter from scratch wasn't going to be easy. They did have a lot of experience with their V12, and the fact that they had proper engines for this feat helped immensely. The Lotarev D136 engines are a work of art. Built by the Progress Design Bureau in Ukrainian USSR and based off the D36 high bypass ratio turbofan engines for the An-74, they had the output of over 11,000 horsepower each. This was more than double the power of the Honeywell engines on the Chinook or the Super Stallion. And these engines were not just powerful, but they were also easy to service, reliable, and they would prove themselves over the long career of the Mi-26. The Mil Bureau had to design a new gearbox under the designation VR-26, which was unique to this helicopter and worked as a split torque gearbox. And this was another amazing piece of engineering that enabled the Mi-26 to become the best in its class. So how exactly does a split torque gearbox make the difference? Well, to put it simply, in a gearbox, it's all about reducing the number of RPMs, or rotations per minute, from the engine input to the router output. You can do that by installing a series of gears with different reduction ratios, and in case of a helicopter gearbox, this is called the planetary gearbox. Why planetary? Well, simply because they're positioned cylindrically similar to our solar system. And while this is a brilliant solution, making it much lighter than a parallel gearbox, it's still quite heavy, and when you want to build the biggest helicopter in the world, this is something you need to consider. So the split torque gearbox introduces a solution which adds 2 secondary stage gears after the pin-on input from the engine, increasing the RPM reduction ratio and eliminates the need for a planetary gearbox in the process. I'll let Real Engineering explain the science behind this, but in short summary, this should give you an insight into why the VR-26 was a game changer. So even though in the end the VR-26 gearbox was around 8% heavier than the R7 gearbox on the Mil-6, it transferred 1.5 times the torque, with the overall horsepower being twice that of the Mil-6. The Mi-26 main rotor was made with the use of titanium and fiberglass for the rotor blades. This allowed the massive 32mm rotor to be 2 tons lighter than the predecessors and generate 30% more lift. And in the end, the Mi-26 dry weight was only 2 tons heavier than the Mi-6, but the internal space was 2 times larger and the payload capacity was 1.8 times larger than its predecessor. Its American counterpart, the CH-53, was in the same category as the Mi-6 and could not even come close to matching the performance of the Mi-26. Only the largest variant, the King Stallion, with its split torque gearbox and new, more powerful engines, can compare to the Mi-26 built almost 50 years ago. But let's talk about the real-world use and what made this helicopter such a compelling choice for heavy transport. The Mi-26 had its first flight in 1977 and it entered service in 1983. One of the most popular variants is the Mi-26T for both civilian and military applications. And boy, this helicopter had some pretty cool innovations for its era. With its crew of 5, it also had a camera facing downwards to allow the crew to monitor the external load attachment and status, as well as help with landing in bad weather and conditions. The cockpit could also be pressurized, and it even had air conditioning, such a luxury and useful for its service in the Middle East. The cargo compartment was 12 by 3.2 by 3.2 meters, which could easily fit trucks, armored vehicles, and even other helicopters. The ramp allowed vehicles to enter the cargo bay on their own power, and there was even an optional crane if the cargo was going to be loaded and unloaded by hand. The landing gear could also be adjusted to lower the back of the helicopter for easier vehicle access as well. The military variant could carry up to 90 soldiers in full gear or up to 60 wounded soldiers on stretchers along with 3 doctors. The maximum payload capacity would be 20 tons, and to this day, the Mi-26 holds the world record for maximum mass taken by a helicopter to the height of 2,000 meters, an astonishing 57 tons. To put this further into perspective, the Mi-26 has a payload capacity higher than that of the C-130, the C-160, or the same as the AN-12 or Airbus A320, which is absolutely insane. The Mi-26 saw its combat debut during the war in Afghanistan and was named Cow by the soldiers, but the lack of armor proved to be unsuitable for the dangerous mountains of Afghanistan. It was used during the Chernobyl disaster to position a massive 15-ton cap over the blown-up reactor block and use its heavy lifting capacity to bring in supplies and prevent the radiation spreading around the vicinity of the nuclear power plant. During the late 80s, the civilian Mi-26T started entering service, and after the fall of the Soviet Union, it was often used as part of construction projects, such as transporting large heavy machinery throughout Siberia, where said machinery wouldn't have to be broken apart to be used in mining projects. It is also often used during emergencies or natural disasters, and there is also a specialized variant for firefighting, which is quite useful considering our topic of firefighting aircraft that we mentioned in a recent video. Apart from Chinooks at the start of the story, the Mi-26 has also rescued a Norwegian Sea King in 2012, and was part of the relief efforts during earthquakes in China in 2008. But in my opinion, one of the most impressive feats of the Mi-26 is in 2011, where a single Mi-26 carried two Mi-26 fuselages from Kazakhstan to Russia for repairs. The Mi-26 holds one negative record, however. It was involved in the largest helicopter disaster in history. In 2002, an overloaded Mi-26 with 147 soldiers and crew members was shot down over Chechnya and crash-landed in a minefield. Only 20 people survived, and to this day it is one of the greatest helicopter tragedies. The Mi-26 may be not as good looking as a Black Hawk, as fast as the Apache, or as armed to the teeth like the Kar-52, but this humble big guy is definitely one of the largest and greatest feats of modern engineering and helicopters that have saved many lives over many years in both civilian and military applications. The engineering behind its gearbox proved to be the key to unlocking the full potential of its American rival, and the latest Mi-26T2V features completely new avionics, reducing the crew size to only 2 and complying to global standards. There is still a future for this giant, even though it's almost 50 years old, and I hope you enjoyed this episode about the biggest helicopter in service today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.